The moving truck rumbled to a stop, its headlights casting long shadows on the dimly lit street. The air was thick with the scent of rain, a storm brewing in the distance. Daniel stepped out, stretching after the long drive. His muscles ached from hours behind the wheel, and he could feel the fatigue settling in his bones. He looked up at the imposing structure of Edgewood Apartments, its dark silhouette looming against the night sky. The building seemed to watch him, its many windows like eyes in the darkness. It was old, with peeling paint and cracked windows that hinted at years of neglect. The once grand facade now stood as a testament to time's relentless march. Still, it was cheap, and that's all that mattered to Daniel right now. He was starting over, and Edgewood Apartments was the only place he could afford. He shifted his weight, feeling the exhaustion of the journey. The long drive had taken its toll, and all he wanted was to get inside and rest. The air hung heavy, thick with the promise of rain. The sky was a deep, foreboding grey, and the first drops began to fall as Daniel started to unload the truck. As he began unloading boxes, a shiver ran down his spine. It wasn't just the cold. There was something else, an unsettling feeling that he couldn't quite shake. There was an unsettling stillness to the place, a sense of being watched. The courtyard was eerily quiet, the only sound the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Daniel shook off the feeling and got to work. He had a lot to do, and he couldn't afford to let his imagination get the better of him. He had a lot to unpack and just wanted to settle in. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but it was his, and that was enough for now. But as he rode the elevator up, he noticed something strange. The elevator was old, with creaky doors and dim lighting that flickered intermittently. Each floor was numbered on a brass plaque above the elevator door. 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5. The numbers seemed to blur together as the elevator ascended. 305, 307, 308. Daniel blinked, sure he must have misread. But no, there it was again. There was no 306. The number was missing, as if it had been deliberately skipped. A chill ran through him as the elevator doors opened to his new home. Daniel frowned, stepping out onto his floor. The hallway was dimly lit, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He had just moved into this old apartment building, and everything about it felt strange. The air was thick with the scent of dust and age, and the silence was almost deafening. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, even though he was alone. He double-checked the number on his keys. 306. The brass tag was cold in his hand, and the number seemed to glint ominously in the dim light. He had been so sure that this was the right floor, but now doubt was creeping in. He was on the right floor, but the missing number on the elevator panel bothered him. It was as if the floor didn't exist, a ghostly absence in the building's layout. He pressed the button for the third floor again, but the elevator doors remained stubbornly closed. It was a small detail, but it gnawed at his unease. Why would a floor number be missing? Was it a simple mistake, or was there something more sinister at play? His mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. He found his apartment and wrestled his belongings inside. The door creaked loudly as it opened, revealing a space that was both grand and decrepit. He set his bags down and took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. The apartment itself was larger than he expected, with high ceilings and dusty chandeliers. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, and the wooden floors creaked with every step. It was a place that had once been beautiful, but now felt forgotten. But the air felt heavy, stagnant. It was as if time had stopped in this place, leaving it suspended in a state of decay. He could see dust motes floating in the air, illuminated by the weak light filtering through the dirty windows. Like it hadn't been lived in for years, the furniture was covered in white sheets, and cobwebs hung in the corners of the room. It was clear that no one had been here for a long time, and he wondered why the apartment had been left in such a state. He decided to ask the landlord about the missing floor number. Maybe there was a simple explanation, something that would put his mind at ease. He made his way down the dark hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence. It was probably just an oversight, a quirk of the old building. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The building seemed to hold its secrets close, and he was determined to uncover them. But something about it felt off, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The missing floor number, the abandoned apartment, the eerie silence, it all added up to a sense of foreboding that he couldn't ignore. He knew he had to find out the truth, no matter what it took. The landlord, a frail old man named Mr. Henderson, paled when Daniel mentioned 306. "You shouldn't concern yourself with that," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. He clutched a set of keys nervously in his trembling hand. Daniel pressed him. "Curious. But why is there no button for it? It's just a number." The landlord wouldn't meet his eyes. "Some things are best left undisturbed," he muttered. "Just forget about 306. His fear was contagious. Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. He decided to let it go for now, but the encounter left him even more unsettled. What was wrong with 306? The first few nights were the hardest. The silence of the building was broken only by the creaking of pipes and the distant wail of sirens. Daniel found it hard to sleep. He kept thinking about the missing floor, about Mr. Henderson's fear. Then came the whispers, faint at first, barely audible. They seemed to drift from the walls, from the air vents, from everywhere and nowhere at once. They spoke his name, called out in hushed, urgent tones. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, the stress of the move playing tricks on his mind, but deep down he knew better. Something was wrong in this building, something about 306. The clock blinked 3:06 a.m. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner. The darkness was thick, almost tangible, wrapping around the room like a heavy blanket. Daniel jolted awake, heart pounding. His breath came in short, sharp gasps as he tried to shake off the remnants of his nightmare. Sweat clung to his skin, making the sheets stick to his body. He'd been having a nightmare, a hazy vision of shadowy figures and echoing screams. The images were still vivid in his mind, the terror still fresh. He could almost hear the whispers, feel the cold breath on his neck. He reached for his phone, needing the reassurance of its familiar weight in his hand. The screen lit up, casting a pale glow that seemed to push back the darkness, if only a little. That's when he saw it, a text message. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment before coming into focus. The number was unfamiliar, just a string of digits. He didn't recognize it, and that made the message all the more unsettling. Who could be texting him at this hour? But the message sent a chill down his spine. "Help me," it read, 3:06, the exact time displayed on his clock. It felt like a cruel joke, but deep down he knew it was something more. He stared at the phone, his breath catching in his throat. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in as if that they were alive. The whispers he had been hearing suddenly felt closer, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from all around him, echoing off the walls and filling his mind with dread. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. It was as if the very atmosphere was alive, pulsing with a dark, malevolent force. He knew with a terrifying certainty that something was about to happen, something that would change his life forever, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. A soft thud broke the silence. Daniel froze, his eyes darting to the apartment door. The knocking came again, a little louder this time, 3 measured raps, then silence. He crept closer to the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew he shouldn't open it. He knew it was a bad idea. But something drew him closer, a morbid curiosity he couldn't ignore. He reached for the doorknob, his hand trembling. The knocking came again, more insistent this time, a frantic drumming against the wood. He took a deep breath and threw open the door. The hallway was empty, but the air crackled with a strange energy. It swirled around him, pulling him forward. He tried to step back to slam the door shut, but it was too late. The swirling darkness engulfed him. He felt himself falling, tumbling through an endless abyss. Screams echoed around him, but he couldn't tell if they were his own. Then everything went black. Morning sunlight streamed through the grimy windows of Edgewood apartments. Mr. Henderson made his way down the hallway, his brow furrowed with worry. He hadn't seen Daniel since their conversation about 306. He reached apartment 306 and froze. The door was ajar, hanging open at an unnatural angle. He cautiously stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no belongings, no sign of Daniel. A chill ran down his spine. He knew, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that he wouldn't be seeing Daniel again. He had warned him. He had told him to forget about 306, but some warnings are meant to be heeded. Mr. Henderson quickly retreated from the apartment, his mind racing. He had to do something, to call someone, but who would believe him? Who would believe that the apartment had swallowed Daniel whole, leaving no trace behind? He glanced back at the open door of 306, a shiver running down his spine. The missing floor, the whispers, the text message, it all made sense now. Apartment 306 was a void, a hungry emptiness that consumed everything in its path. And Daniel, young, curious Daniel, had become just another one of its victims, erased from existence, his very presence in Edgewood Apartments forgotten, as if he had never been there at all.